Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus arcade video. Today we're going to be taking a look at, another look at Soulcalibur, released on the Namco System 12 hardware. If you hadn't seen any of my 3 previous videos, this is the same hardware that ran Tekken Tag Tournament and Tekken 3. And now when I had originally recorded those videos, I had recorded a bunch more gameplay, so at this point I kind of figured I should do the commentaries and stuff for this, so I don't have at some point where I will not have the files to put these together. But Yoshimitsu here was one of those times when there's a character in a fighting game and it was kind of one of those, oh wow, that character is from a different game, but now he's fighting the way that you think he should. Because I could always remember when I played Tekken 3, I always thought to myself, why doesn't Yoshimitsu have a part where he just like breaks his sword out and just starts, you know, fighting with the sword? It seemed kind of weird that you had this character who was holding a sword and punching people. It would be like a gangster with a gun, and all he did was hit people with the butt of the gun, and he never actually like pulled the trigger, and you'd be like, dude, why do you even have a gun? But that's what Yoshimitsu always made me think of when I played him in Tekken. And of course, if you're unfamiliar with Soulcalibur here, or if you've not seen the 3 previous videos that I had released on this game, the original Soulcalibur was released on the Namco System 12 hardware in 1998, July 30th of 98 for the Japan market, and then just sometime in 98 for the North American/European market. The only at the time port that it received was the Dreamcast version in 1999, August 5th in Japan, September 9th in North America, and of course not until November 26th in Europe, because they need to translate it to all the languages that are in Europe, of course. Then it wasn't until not until July 2nd of 2008, they released an Xbox 360 arcade version that did not have online play, which was still kind of the biggest why not in my whole opinion. Then of course, January 19th of 2012 you got your iOS, and then November 20th of 2013 you got your Android versions, which were both based off of the Dreamcast version as well as the Xbox 360. They weren't like based off of this Namco System 12 arcade version, which used souped up PlayStation graphics with, speaking of which, as I may have said in the previous videos, basically think of Namco System 12 as like PlayStation Pro or PlayStation Plus, if you will. It basically is the original PlayStation spec, but it kind of has a bit more horsepower, and I hear some more RAM behind it. But as far as I've seen, when it comes to specs, I've never actually seen a solid spec for the system. And of course, this system is fairly similar to Namco System 256 in the respect that it's an established spec, and they just basically souped it up a bit, and your games can more or less be a bit more intense, if you will. Namco System 256 being the upgraded PS2 spec that Tekken 5 used. And just like Tekken 3, Tekken 5 was then backported to the PlayStation 2, the basic spec, just like how Tekken 3 was backported to PlayStation, the basic spec, and in both cases they had to lose a bit of graphic fidelity. And if you see here, Edgemaster actually just is using the Yoshimitsu fighting style against me, which I always think that's fun in a, one of these like random characters, like if you're facing against Mokujin as Yoshimitsu, and then all of a sudden Mokujin has the stick, because I don't know if you've seen in Tekken when Mokujin imitates Yoshimitsu, he doesn't have like the laser sword like Yoshimitsu has. It's like legitimately like a metal stick, or I think in the case of the wooden Mokujin, it's like a log. So like Mokujin can still do the Yoshimitsu limited sword movements in Tekken 3 and Tekken Tag. but that's one thing I definitely have to say, as I was mentioning earlier. The best part about Soulcalibur is that Yoshimitsu actually is a sword fighter, finally. I mean, he's not a dude holding a sword punching people. It would be like, as I had mentioned earlier, the whole thing with the gun and only hitting people with the gun and never actually shooting with it. It's like, it makes me think of Back to the Future Part 3 when they were asking if Marty was asking if Doc was drunk, and he's just holding the shot, and he's like, no, he doesn't drink, he just holds it. That basically is the, that's basically the antithesis of Yoshimitsu in Tekken 3, or any of the Tekken games for that matter. No, he doesn't slash people with his sword, except for every once in a while. For the most part, he just holds it. But in this gameplay, thankfully enough, it looks like I only actually had to edit out one loss, like one full 2-round loss. Because after a while, when I play a game like Soulcalibur, I kind of get my footing for that, and I kind of, how do I want to say it? You just kind of get into the groove, if you will, and then you can kind of do these gameplays one after another. But it's one of those things. At the time of this recording, like recording the commentary for this, it's almost been 2 months since I recorded the gameplay, and at this point, it probably would take me a gameplay or two to kind of get back into the Soulcalibur groove, and if these videos end up doing well enough, I might even do more characters, but, The funny part is, I just mentioned that, it just made me think of something that happened when I was recording the videos. I had gone into the game and I was like, oh, this gameplay is going to be Cervantes. And then I didn't realize, yeah, Cervantes is not in the arcade version of Soulcalibur. He's not selectable there until you got to the Dreamcast version, and then he pretty much was a mainstay in the series ever since. And now that's one thing that I always make mention of in any of these Namco System 12 videos, is the 3D backgrounds. I know a lot of people kind of like to make fun of them because they don't look so great compared to, like, say, the Dreamcast version, which of course, for all intents and purposes, the Dreamcast version was more or less a remake because you have all that power of the Sega Dreamcast. You can make everything, like, super smooth, like a PlayStation 2 game. Similar to how the Namco System 12 game, Tekken Tag Tournament, got brought up to the PS2 standards. So you basically took a good-looking game already in the PlayStation spec and brought it up to PS2 standards. That's the same thing that happened with Soulcalibur here. The game, basically, instead of having your, like, bitmap PlayStation backgrounds that are... they're fully 3D, but the buildings just look like buildings. They don't look amazing or anything. You then were able to take the Dreamcast and make everything look super smooth. Although, honestly, I don't know if it's just me or something, but I'm kind of a fan of the whole, like, jaggy-looking PlayStation aesthetic. It's kind of one of those things where, since I was a teenager when the original PlayStation was, like, a new console, and I still remember those days when I went over to my friend's house and he had Battle Arena Toshinden and Twisted Metal, and those were like my first quote-unquote like 3D games, if you will. It just kind of has that nostalgia for me. When I see graphics like this, I'm kind of like, oh, well, this was the day. As I was saying, it was kind of like, oh, this is the day when 3D graphics become like a big thing. And then, of course, more or less, it did legitimately become a big thing, and all of your games after this were kind of, well, all of your games after that, when PlayStation came out and 3D became mainstream, you had your PlayStation, your Sega Saturn, your Nintendo 64, and to a lesser extent, like the 3DO, which had a couple of 3D games, but nobody really saw them because $700 was a lot for a game console. Yeah, it kind of ushered in that 3D age, so more or less when I play games from PlayStation generation systems, it just kind of brings me back to that, wow, everything is moving in 3D, and now I don't have to just move side to side. But seeing Nightmare here makes me think of how he was in Soul Edge, which, as I had made mention of in some of the previous videos, I do plan to do a bunch more Soul Edge videos because I'm going to be using the what's it called? The Cyber Lead IO board, which basically will take your JAMA board and bring it into JVS, so I can then use OpenJVS and actually mount the controls through like an Xbox 360 controller, which is what I was playing with in this game. And here's Nightmare's dramatic transition. And now, speaking of the of Nightmare here, whenever I see this stage, it always makes me think of that stage from Soul Edge where you're facing Soul Edge, who's basically Cervantes with his with only his vest, and like the rest of his body is kind of replaced by fire. And instead of it just being a fairly generic starfield like it is here, it's basically Cervantes' stage destroyed, and all the stuff is like flying in the background. And I remember when I played that for the first time, I was like, wow, these graphics are like amazing. I was like so used to even generic 2D fighting games where you basically had, how do I want to say it? You basically just had static, like nothing in the background. Then we got the 3D where it was just like a picture. And then here's going to be Yoshimitsu's ending for the arcade version of Soulcalibur. Okay, and then of course that was the ending for Yoshimitsu in Soulcalibur, the arcade version here. But what I was saying was, I remember being so impressed by that Soul Edge stage where everything was like destroyed and flying in the background. It was kind of one of those, oh wow, the graphics are really, really like amazing type moments in your life. Probably similar to the first time I played Battle Arena Toshinden or Twisted Metal, because first of all, you're playing this fighting game, and you could see the waterfalls and everything moving in the background, and your character could then roll and or cartwheel in the third dimension. And then, of course, Twisted Metal, you're in a car, and the car doesn't just go like up and down the screen. The car can just free roam in this big open stage. And that was like one of those, wow, 3D games are here type moments. And that's what I always think of when I play games that use like PlayStation graphics. And of course, if you saw the credits there, the regular credits for the North American or Japanese versions would have said Mitsurugi instead of Arthur, and it would have showed the appropriate voice actor, because I'd imagine the same dude don't voice the two characters, or it would seem too similar, but I'm honestly not sure. But definitely have to say, if you've not played it before, the arcade version of Soulcalibur is an excellent game that I would really highly recommend for anybody who likes weapons-based fighting games. Just a fun time, no matter how many times I played. It's kind of one of those games that I could legitimately pop in any time and still have fun with it. And as I'd made mention of in the previous videos, no matter how fast I went, I could never get a top time here. So it just showed the character there sad that they did not get a top time. But yeah, this has been another Game Nexus arcade video, and any way you possibly can play the original Soul Calibur. It's a great game. And I shall see you later. Bye.